Let's talk about cinnamon. I love cinnamon. If I had to choose a favorite spice, it would always be a top contender for a favorite spice. In fact, I love cinnamon so much, I named my daughter Cassia. So there's a little irony there because if you're familiar with cinnamon, one of the important things about cinnamon is to make sure that you are getting the right genus and species. There's a lot of plants out there that are called cinnamon. And what you're mostly looking for medicinal species is Cinnamomum verum, or previously called Cinnamomum zeylanicum. And that is a different cinnamon than the cassia cinnamon. So they all taste cinnamony. And a lot of what you're tasting when you have that really bold, spicy cinnamon is cassia cinnamon, which is fine for cooking, but less medicinal because of the coumarins. With the cassia cinnamons, then you don't really want to be taking them all the time because of the coumarin levels in the cinnamon. What you really want to be doing is to take the cassia cinnamon. So, no, sorry, to take the cinnamomum cinnamon. So I'm going to confuse you. So here's, this is from Mountain Rose. This is a sweet cinnamon powder. And you can see Cinnamomum verum and sweet cinnamon powder. This is the medicinal species that I would tend to use if I'm going to be cooking. So this is going to be a little bit more expensive. If it doesn't say that it's Cinnamomum verum or true cinnamon or Sri Lankan cinnamon or something like that, then it's not. It's cassia cinnamon. So especially if it's like Latin American cinnamon or so on, it's not usually this species. And if you've seen cinnamon as cinnamon sticks before, which you probably have, these are generally going to be the cassia cinnamon because the true cinnamon is actually very flaky and falls apart really easily. And it's not as good for throwing into your hot apple cider or something like that. So you can use it that way, but when people think about cinnamon sticks that you can like bang around and so on, these are going to be the cassia cinnamon type. So cinnamon, I mean, there's endless ways to use cinnamon. There's so much wonderful medicinal information, so many applications. I like to think of cinnamon as one of my favorite carminatives, so really supportive for digestive distress and digestive upset, even on an ongoing basis. I'm going to share with you one of my favorite recipes for that in a little bit, and it's just fantastic the how medicinal cinnamon can be in that way. So I also think of cinnamon a lot in supporting people who have a uterus. The people who have a uterus often can have like boggy, cold cycles, or things can feel just like very heavy before they actually start bleeding. And so by using cinnamon, it can be warming and very moving, and that can be a wonderful way to move things along. So I love cinnamon in that way as a little bit of a gentle emmenagogue. So that's helpful if you have a uterus and you experience things like that. One of the best ways that it's used contemporarily is to support a healthy blood sugar balance. And so you can do some great things supporting a healthy blood sugar balance with cinnamon. There's so much research on it. And it's also incredibly safe, it's affordable, and it's delicious. I mean, I find that of all the spices, cinnamon is one of the ones that people dislike the least. So people love cinnamon, that kind of deliciousness. And one of the cool things about cinnamon you might not know is it's actually a little bit of a mucilage. If you put cinnamon in water and you cook it, it actually turns gooey. So it does have a mucilaginous property. Before I knew this, I'd put a ton of cinnamon in something like hot apple cider and I'd cook it. And then at the end, I'd be like, what is this gooey stuff in the bottom of my pot? Like, where did it come from? And that was the cinnamon and its mucilage over time. So there's some really cool research on cinnamon. There's a lot of things around working memory and diabetes, which is really, really interesting. So if you have impaired memory function, especially if you find that you get a little bit of brain foggy after eating, or if you're pre-diabetic, cinnamon has been shown in certain studies to be very helpful in working memory that's impaired in pre-diabetics. There's also a great blood sugar stabilization effect of cinnamon. There's a lot of research around looking at cinnamon and people who have labile blood sugar or their hemoglobin A1C levels are not optimal, which that kind of is like a broader snapshot of how steady your blood sugar levels are. So people who have taken cinnamon, even just a gram a day, which again is a pretty small amount, super easy to take a gram, just sprinkle that on any of your food. then you can definitely be using cinnamon in that way. And people have found that to be incredibly helpful for stabilizing or improving hemoglobin A1C levels. There's also some interesting cinnamon research for people who aren't pre-diabetic, who just find that after eating, they feel tired or they feel sluggish. Cinnamon can be a great accompaniment in your meals when you do that. So how to use cinnamon? Most of you probably already know how to use cinnamon. It's great in all sorts of sweet dishes and in all sorts of savory dishes. It's easy to sprinkle it on top. If anything ever calls for like a quarter teaspoon of cinnamon, just disregard that entirely. I don't even know if I've ever measured cinnamon. I usually like the container I have it in has, the shaker on one side and the big opening on the other, and I just dump it in usually with the big opening because there's just so much to love about cinnamon. And I find, there's a lot of delicious things that you can have. So over those gingerbread pancakes I mentioned, we sauteed a lot of really cinnamony apples, super cinnamony apples, and put those on top of those pancakes, and they were absolutely delicious. So lots of ways to use cinnamon. You can definitely add it to cooked foods. You can add it when you're cooking your foods. And I'm going to show you one of my very favorite cinnamon recipes so you can add more of it into your life.